and welcome to Paint Pot. My name is Becky and today I'm filming for you a step-by-step guide on your first pottery painting session. So if you've never painted pottery before, I'll explain how to clean your pottery before painting, how many coats to use of paint, what brushes are best for what, how to use a detailed writer and more. So please have a nice watch of the video, and if you have any further questions then please let me know. I'm always on the other end of an email, Instagram or the phone. So yes, enjoy, and I hope you create an amazing masterpiece. So the first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to take your sponge and you're going to put it into the water, and then with a really wet sponge you need to wipe down your pottery. Basically the pottery arrives quite dusty, and that makes for a really difficult paint service. So the best thing we can do is get some water and give it a good wipe. Doesn't matter how much water, it should be quite a bit because we want it to be really dust free. So you want to do that all over your piece of pottery. And that includes, if you're doing a mug, that includes the bottom and the inside. Same with plates, bowls, and animals as well. So I want to go inside of that. Okay, so when you're happy that your piece of pottery has been wiped down with water and it's not too dusty to touch anymore, then you are ready to start painting. But obviously before we start painting, we want to decide what paint colours you want. So you need to just consult the paint colour chart and consult which colours you'd like. So I think I am going to create a lovely cup with my name on it today. So I'm going to choose, let's go with number 7, which is this one here. And then what you want to do is, because you don't want too much paint, what you want to do is you want to take this little bit off the top, so the detailed writer, and then twist the top off of the paint. And then we just want a tiny little bit because we don't know how much we want yet. So we'll just pour, like squeeze in just a tiny little bit. So that'll be enough for now. Let me just show you. So that will be enough for now, and then we can always add more later. So I'll keep that close by to my paint palette. So what you're going to need to do is, with this colour, you're going to need to paint it 3 times in order to get a nice finish. But for me, what I want to do is I want to have a straight line the whole way around the mug. So I'm going to apply some washi tape. Okay, so to create a straight line all the way around the mug, I need to put my washi tape around it. A mug that the tape lines up exactly on each side. Okay. So here we go, we've got a nice straight line all the way around my mug, so then I can start painting. So I'm going to take a really big brush because I want all of this and the bottom to be one solid colour. So I'm going to need a big brush for this. I'm probably going to need more paint, but as I said before, the best thing to do is do a little bit at a time because you'll be surprised how much paint you actually need. You don't need very much. So I painted my first layer of my mug. As you can see, it's quite clear still, so you can still see some patches because it's only one layer so far. So for these paints to come out exactly the colour that you see them here, you need to paint the colour 3 times. So you need 3 layers of each paint coat to have a really solid colour. So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to paint 2 more coats of this. And hopefully we'll get a nice solid colour. So now I've done 3 layers of the same paint. As you can see, it's a lot smoother. You can't see the underneath ceramic, so I'm quite happy with that. I think it might still be a little bit patchy, but I quite like that. If you want it to be a complete solid colour, I would suggest doing at least another coat or one more. If it's a really light colour, 5 or 6 coats wouldn't go amiss if you're going for a really block colour. So you might be able to see that I've actually got a bit of paint on my handle. I'm going to make this handle black so it doesn't matter too much. So what I'd advise for you to do is, if you're doing a mixture of light and dark colours, you should do the light colour first, and then put the black and the darker colours over the top. If, however, you do want a dark colour with a light colour over the top, you're going to have to paint a lot of layers for that light colour to show over the dark. So just be very aware of that. It might be worth leaving a gap where you're going to be doing a light colour over a dark colour. So okay, so that's 3 layers of coat on this bit of mug. It dries very quickly. You may have seen that I was pretty much able to just keep going round and round. That's because the paint for ceramic dries very quickly, so by the time I'd gotten around to the other side, it had dried again and I was able to keep going. The best thing to do is, if like me you are quite forgetful as to where you started, on a mug it's quite simple. You start where the handle is and work your way round. That way you don't lose track of how many layers you're doing, and you don't forget where you started either. For a plate, I would suggest kind of keeping your thumb like held where you paint where you start painting, and the same with anything like that's quite flat that you're not able to have like a marker. Okay, so that is this. It has pretty much dried, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to take the washi tape off now, so we'll keep our fingers crossed that this goes okay. So as you can see, it's a pretty much very straight line. There's the odd little divot, but I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to keep the top white, so that works really well. Basically the white comes out the colour of this. So if you're looking for a brighter white, then I suggest going for this one. You can't really see it on camera, but there is a slightly whiter tone to our white paint. Okay, so I've used my brush and I don't need that colour anymore. So you just need to make sure that you clean your brush in between paints, because the last thing you need to do is get the colours mixed up on your cup and then you've got a mixture of colours that you didn't actually want. So I tend to wash my brush here and then put it on the sponge to wipe it dry and then put it back in the paintbrush. Okay, so now I am going to paint this handle black. So I've got my black poured out. I've chosen this slightly smaller paintbrush because I don't want to get any black on the actual mug bit itself. Now, okay, so you're painting the handle, so what do you hold now? So if you're doing a mug, the best thing to do is put your hand inside and then you'll be able to paint with ease. Okay, so I've painted my mug handle, but as you can see I haven't gone very close to it yet. So if you're doing a mug like this, the best thing to do is, once you've done the full bit of colour, is to grab a much smaller brush to do the detailing work. So I'm going to now use this tiny brush here, just to get in little tiny bits and try not to get any black on the pink or the white. So I would advise you to do that as well if you're doing some nice little detailed work or a different coloured handle on your mug. Okay, so we're going to now create a circle on the front of the mug. So I'm going to use this grey, but because I'm going to use this sponge stick here, I need a flatter surface. So that's what the middle of the paint palette is for. So let's get a decent amount of paint, and you kind of want to swirl it around a bit. So then you're going to take your sponge stick and you're going to try and coat every single bit of the sponge. There we go, so we've got a full sponge, and then I'm going to lay it down, and I want it about here so I can see it when I'm holding it, and you literally just sponge it down pretty firmly and then let go. So we've got a circle. It's a pretty spongy circle at the moment, so what we're going to do is we're going to do that again once it's dry. So because it's a spongy one, it's going to take a little bit longer to dry, so we're just going to wait for that to dry, and then we'll do that 2 times more so that it's a nice perfect circle. Okay, so we've done the spot, nice and clear circle now, so that's still drying a little bit, so we're going to be a bit careful. But now I'd like to write my name on the other side of the mug. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the felt tip pen and I'm going to hold the mug inside and just kind of decide where I want my name first, and then I'm going to just go ahead and write my name with the felt tip pen. So I've written my name. It's not quite in the right place, but you know, it's pottery painting, so nothing is ever going to be perfect, but I'm quite pleased with where it is, so I'm happy to continue. So what we want to do now is we're going to be doing writing, so we're going to take off this bit of the lid and we're going to be using the detailed writer bit. So the best thing I'm going to do, the way I'm going to do it, is I'm going to hold my mug like this. I'm going to try and pretend I'm just writing like with a normal pen. So the best thing to do first is like squeeze a little bit out onto the palette so you know how fast it's going to be coming out. And then you simply just follow the lines. Now I am not the very best at writing, but I do give it a good go, and that's what pottery painting is all about. So let's give it a go. Okay, so I'm going to write the rest of the letters, but this is how the B's come out pretty nicely. And with the detailed writers, because it comes out so thick, you only need to do this once. So thankfully you don't need to go over all the really detailed bits any more times. You just need to do it once. So I have finished the lettering, so I think that's probably quite good for me actually. I'm quite impressed with myself. You might have seen in the time lapse that when I finished with the detail writer, I just cleaned it off here just because it does gather at the top. So if you could do that, that would be amazing, but you know, just for me really. Okay, so what if you make a mistake? So on my mug, I have accidentally, and this is true, I have accidentally done it, there is a tiny bit of pink up in the white section here. So what I've done is I've changed my water so it's nice and clean again after cleaning my brushes, and I'm going to get a nice clean bit of my sponge. Right, so we're going to get a tiny bit of water. We don't want to overcoat it because it might drip down into the pink, and we're going to get that little bit there. We're just going to wipe it off. Okay, all gone. So this works very well with light colours. You need to make sure that your water is very clean and your sponge is clean before you do it, because it does, otherwise it will just smudge any colour that you have in the water or on your sponge. But my mug is now finished, so that's going to go in the kiln with everybody else's stuff soon enough. So let's recap the steps, shall we? So step number 1, you want to take a wet sponge before you paint anything on and wipe it down. So you want to get as much dust off of the pottery as you possibly can. Step 2, you need to consult the colour chart, not the paint bottles. The colour chart will show you the true colour of what the paint comes out as after your pottery has been in the kiln. Step number 3, when you're applying paint, you want to do 3 coats if you want a nice solid colour. If you're looking for a wishy-washy colour, then 1 coat is fine, but we recommend at least 3 or 4 coats to get a nice solid colour. If it's a really light colour, you might want to go for 4 or 5. And remember, if you forget where you started, best thing to do on a mug is use a handle. On a plate, use where your thumb's holding it. And if you're not sure what number you've got to, always add one more layer if you're looking for a nice thick finish. Number 4. It's always easier to paint dark colours over light colours. So I would always advise to have a darker design over a lighter design. If, however, you do want light colours over dark, you're going to need to put a lot more paint on. So make sure you do more than 3 layers, because otherwise the dark will try and get through in the kiln. Number 5. Use the water and clean your paintbrush between paints. There's nothing worse than having a blackish pink when you wanted a nice solid pink. So make sure you're cleaning your paintbrush between and using the sponge to wipe off any excess water. Number 6, you won't need very much paint at all, so just put in a tiny bit amount of paint into your palette and then keep pouring as and when you need it. And I always recommend that you pour out the paint when you need it, rather than keep adding it all at the start for it to then dry out while you're painting. Okay, and then top tips for you. To get a nice solid straight line, you need to use the washi tape. To get a nice circle, use our little sponge dotter. And to get some nice detail and writing, use the detailed writer heads, which comes with every single colour, so you can have a rainbow letter if you'd like. But that is all my top tips and a quick, hopefully quick, guide of how to paint your first piece of pottery. If you've got any remaining questions, please let me know. I look forward to seeing all your masterpieces, and I'm going to go and put this in the kiln.